I mentioned that we don't care what other tooling you use. You can use your investments there. This artifact comes from the build, but I could also grab an artifact from another location. So for example, a Jenkins build or another TFBC. Docker Hub is pretty new as well, so I can pull a Docker image
Can
down.
it be any Docker Hub, or does it have to be Dockers?
It can be any Docker Hub.
Nice.
So literally any endpoint credentials it'll take. The other one is TeamCity, which is installed via an extension. So that marketplace I showed before is a TeamCity extension that'll let you pull those artifacts too. Or if you have like a static website, you can just pull it from GitHub if you wanted to. I think, in fact, so source repo, and then it'll ask you for a branch and all sorts of stuff as well. So that's the first thing. The second thing is if you're not deploying to Azure, that's not a problem either. There's the idea of, in your deployment, these different phases that run on the agents, but you can add a deployment group phase. And what that is a phase where each of the steps will run on all of the machines in a deployment group. So just to demonstrate, let's just set one up. I don't have a deployment group yet, but let's create one. And it might be something like, prod web servers. What you can do then is install the agent, exactly the same build release agent as we were using before, on a target machine, and then that target machine gets registered as, hey, I am a prod web server, for example. To do it, here's the script for Windows. If you use the copy script to clipboard thing and check that checkbox, it'll actually add credentials into what's added to your clipboard. And if you're using Linux as well, you can do Linux agents and install them that way. So same thing, there's a bash script to install the agent, register it with VSTS. So once you've set those things up, you can say every step that's in here will run on the prod web servers, and you might do something like do an IIS app service deploy. So you could deploy to your 5-server web farm, and it will run those tasks on that local machine. So you don't need to worry about PowerShell remoting and weird things like that. So that's pretty cool too. So it's not just for Azure. Again, any platform, any language, we don't care. It's made available. So anyway, those are the two things I forgot. The other demos are shorter, I promise. 2014, I think Satya took the reins of Microsoft. Was it 2014? That seems really recent. Maybe it was. From Steve Ballmer. And this kind of represented a bit of a shift in the way Microsoft thought about the development community. Steve Ballmer, the previous CEO, had been quoted as saying Linux is cancer. Verbatim, I believe. When what he meant was that because it's open source, if you use any kind of open source technology, then you're kind of required to make your stuff open source. And he thought, his opinion basically was people should be paid for their effort, which I think is pretty reasonable. But by making a comment like that, he kind of shut Microsoft out of the open source community. Satya came in a few years ago and he has completely changed that perception. It's taken a while for Microsoft to actually be considered legitimate in the open source space, but it is definitely starting to happen now. Microsoft, by at least one measure, the company is the largest contributor to open source projects on GitHub. Now, there's plenty that can be argued against that particular statistic, namely things like, I think it's Google, and is Google Angular? Is that Google's one? Google and Angular are in there as two separate companies. The point is not that Microsoft's on the top of this leaderboard. It's the point is that Microsoft is on this leaderboard. Like, we have engineering people who contribute more to open source than people who are open source environment people. So the story has definitely shifted since the days of Steve Ballmer. So again, this point of any language, any platform, we're legitimately trying to make this the case. Microsoft now is trying to compete on merit more than anything else. Gone are the days where we try to lock you into that ecosystem. So if you use one Microsoft product, you have to use all of them. we are trying to make it as easy as possible to use whatever tool set, whatever language, whatever platform, and use Microsoft tooling to help you with that effort. It's kind of a land and expand strategy if you want to think about it from a marketing perspective. Yes, if there's a gap in what you're doing, Microsoft wants to be a legitimate solution to that gap. You'll land on Microsoft, maybe, or hopefully you'll love it, and you'll start looking at what other services Microsoft can offer as well, and hopefully expand in those directions as well. So it's a legitimate marketing strategy. It's not completely, altruistic. We still want your money. Or was it the classic thing, Microsoft just wants your for loop, so we would like you to put your stuff in Azure. We don't care if it's running on Linux though. That's also fine. So things like the Windows subsystem for Linux means that you can just write bash in Windows now, if that's your scripting language of choice. I actually don't exit my Mac OS very often. When I joined Microsoft, they gave me a MacBook. I had one already, but they gave me a new one, which is fine. I didn't argue. And I use VS Code on Mac, and I use the terminal, and I sometimes boot into Ubuntu. I run PowerShell sometimes on my Mac terminal, because PowerShell works in Mac now as well. So there's legitimately a lot of engineers at Microsoft who are making this stuff much easier. So the next demo is a little bit around this. I'm going to do some Java. So I haven't done Java really since I left school. Left university, which was at least 2 years ago, closer to 20. So we're going to do Java, and I'm going to do it in Ubuntu as well. And I'm going to use, I'm not going to use like Microsoft tooling, I'm going to use IntelliJ. I'm going to try to if I remember my password. Because I'm not a Java guy and I don't know IntelliJ very well, there's going to be a lot of this kind of thing where I zoom in because I don't know how to increase the font size. So one thing I'm going to point out as well is there are some really good extensions for IntelliJ that Microsoft has created. So there's a plugin for IntelliJ that allows you to add things to the version control stuff that's in IntelliJ, which allows you to do things like look at work items in Visual Studio Team Services. So these are the work items that I have in VSTS, the work that I have planned that I'm supposed to do. If I wanted to check out from source control as well, I have Team Services Git and TFVC as just part of the native tooling after I've installed this extension. So I mentioned that I was going to touch on branching strategy here as well. Because I'm running Java, I'm obviously in this scenario working at a gigantic enterprise, and I'm not allowed to do things like commit code to the master branch. So I have some branching strategies around how I'm allowed to operate. So if we have a look at branches, this is in VSTS, this is the Java application. I think I can zoom in here, cool. So we have one branch at the moment, we have our master branch. But you can see this little icon says that there are policies around this branch. I can't just commit to it. So let's have a look at those policies. The number one policy here is to protect this branch. In other words, people cannot commit directly to master, which is pretty sensible. I can also set things like requiring a minimum number of reviewers. So at least 2 or 3 people maybe need to review my code before it can get merged back into master. I have to have a related work item, so I can't just write code and say I've made some changes. I have to link it to something that's on my backlog. And that can be required or optional. I don't know why you would say check for linked work items but make it optional. That doesn't seem to make sense to me, but anyway. And there's another one which is really cool, which is comment resolution. So when I have a pull request, somebody can look at those changes and make a comment like, hey, I think you need to change this. If this is turned on, I have to go in here and mark that as resolved to say, I read your comment, I understood it, I made some changes. Yes, I have resolved that. You can also do things like merge strategies, like no fast forward merges or doing squash merges and things like that. But here's the really cool one. Oh, actually, no, I'll skip the cool one for a sec. You can also say there's automatic reviewers. So for example, based on the path of files that have changed, this person or this team needs to review those changes. So for example, if the path in the code is under the security folder, then this team needs to review those changes before I can merge it. And then there's also the option to add third-party services. So if I have some external tools like static code analysis and things like that, to make sure I haven't introduced any security vulnerabilities, I can make those tools call back into VSTS to say, yes, this one's been analyzed, it's fine, you can merge this back into master. So there's a lot you can do here. This is my favorite one though, which is that it must build. So I actually have a separate build definition in here that runs a whole bunch of extra tests. It does things like sonar cube analysis, which is like analysis that looks at technical debt and things like that. In other words, have I introduced a bunch of code that doesn't have tests around it? Or is there a whole lot of unreachable code in there? So this build definition here will build against that PR and make sure that that PR succeeds before it will be merged in. In other words, I can't merge any code that doesn't build and pass my tests. And this is an automatic thing. So let's do a change. So I have this work item here. Here's my backlog. I'm just going to replace this banner with a link to Azure. So this is my website, for example, just to let you know. This is my website. It's a hello world with Spring in Java. That's as much as I know about this hello world site. But I'm going to change that banner with a link to Azure. Now, luckily, I thought ahead. And I've already got that code in place. This is, by the way, this is the best way to write code, is just with comments. And pro tip as well, if you just scatter thread.sleeps throughout your entire code base, whenever anybody complains about performance, you just go and comment one out and commit it and push it. Yeah, don't do that. So I have this, here's this query, my incomplete work. So this is this work item, replace banner with a link to Azure. Now, because I can't commit straight to master, actually, you know what, just to make sure, I'm going to undo those changes and I'll do them again. After I've created the branch. All right, so I need to create a branch so I can do a pull request. So let's right click, create a branch. And here, I can name my branch. Now I'm going to use a pretty common pattern, which is my alias and then new banner title. So it's my alias and then a slash, which means it'll actually be grouped underneath the folder of all my changes, which is kind of a nice way of doing it. You might also want to do it based on the work item ID or something like that. Totally up to you. The point is that it's not the master branch. And we can see right here, because I did it against that work item has actually been linked to that branch in VSTS. So there's already a relationship between the branch and the work item. So that's cool. Let's make these changes again. Whoa, nope. I've got the MacBook dongle edition, which has that lovely little LCD thing across there, and it means you can't plug anything in without adapters. So I just hit the Siri button. Anyway, so all right, I've made my change, and I want to push that change up to that branch and then create a pull request. So let's just use, and these are the out-of-the-box IntelliJ tools. So this is commit changes, and you can see I've already got the previous commit message. Weird thing with IntelliJ, it keeps the previous commit message, which seems odd to me. Anyway, here's another bit of integration though. Select work items from VSTS. So here's all of the work items. And it's this one that I'm doing. So I'll add that as the related work item. And I get this commit message with the details of that work item. Now the only thing that actually matters here is this #117. I could replace all of this with #117, and this commit would then be related to work item number 117. So those are the changes. I'm going to commit and push. Like any good developer, I'm not even going to compile or run tests or anything. I'm just going to assume it works. And so we can, again, we get more alerts down here, and we can click on that link and go to the branch itself. So here is the branch. So this is the code in that branch. If we go to the branches tab again, we can see that we've got this new branch underneath the folder that I created based on that convention I used. What I can do is, there's two ways to create this pull request as well. I can just hover over it and click new pull request because it knows it's based on master. Or I think I can go to pull requests and it says, hey, you just updated this, do you want to create a pull request? Very similar to GitHub if you're familiar with that. Let's create a new pull request. It gives me the ability to add a whole lot of stuff, and you can see here's the related work items that I've got. The reviewers are already set to the entire team that I'm in because I didn't set anything additional on that. It's just saying, yeah, look, these people are reviewers, they're optional. So let's create that pull request. Now, I'll draw your attention over here. We've got work items linked, so here are our policies. Our work items are linked because I did that in a couple of spots. There are no comments that need to be resolved, but if I add one, like, this sucks, I need to beat it to the thing. Now we can see that policy doesn't match anymore. I haven't met that requirement. So I can say, it doesn't work so well when it's just one person, but anyway. So I can reply and mark that as resolved, and then that policy has been met. But other people, like your manager, could say, no, you need to change this isn't our standard. You have to explicitly say, yes, this is good to go. The other thing is that this build succeeded. So this actual build that was created, we can go to that build, and it's the same thing we looked at before. So there's Bower, Maven for building Java, and even, I think, if you have a look at the, we've got test results, we've got code coverage, and all that kind of stuff. But this is just my PR build. This doesn't actually go anywhere. It just compiles and runs my tests. So that's kind of cool.
So when you say your PR build, is it your actual integration build? Has it done the merge on the build machine?
It has done. Good question. So I think, and I have to find out. I think it does the merge on the
right. So it's an integration build.
Yeah, it's an integration. So it takes your pull request, merges it, builds it, and says, yeah, this is okay.
Same as getting check-in.
Yeah, it basically makes sure that you're not going to merge some stuff that's terrible. So I've also got this link now that says complete. If I had been faster, that would have said set autocomplete, which basically means that if all of these policies match, just automatically complete it. But I'll do that manually now. So we'll complete that build, that pull request, and I can also say squash, delete the branch because I don't need it anymore, and complete those work items. So the work items that I attached, it'll move them to say they're done now,
Nice.
which is pretty handy. So it'll do that merge. If I wanted to, I can cherry pick this into other branches as well. So if I had a more complicated branching policy, I could do that. Or I could revert that whole change if I wanted to. But let's just jump back to the branches, and you'll see that branch is gone because I deleted it. But then over here, I've still got a CI build against my master branch. And this is a different build definition. This isn't my PR build. This has less stuff in it. It's my Docker build. Actually, it has more stuff in it. The reason it has more stuff in it is because it's building a Docker image. So I made the decision when I created my PR build that I didn't need to create a Docker image because that takes extra time. I don't need to test that it can create a Docker image. I just need to run the tests that I care about. But my CI build, yes, I need to create a Docker image afterwards. So it's going ahead and it's building this Docker image. And then at the end of that, I have a release definition, which will take that Docker image and deploy it to an Azure App Service. So let's edit that definition just to show you what that looks like. So it's taking that artifact from the build, deploying to dev. There's 2 tasks. I'm kind of being overly cautious here because sometimes this doesn't work so well in what I've been using. I'm removing the running container and then I'm running that image. So these are out-of-the-box Docker steps that are in VSTS that you can use. I have connections to my Docker registry, my Azure Container Service, all sorts of stuff to run that. So I'm using Azure for the container registry and also for the container service. We've just recently, I think, announced a hosted Kubernetes solution as well. So if I wanted to use Kubernetes instead, that's an option out of the box with VSTS. But as well as that, I don't even need to set up Kubernetes myself. That's now a hosted service in Azure. I can't really give you much information about it because it literally happened today. But if you wanted to use K8 for something like that, that's definitely doable. Let's see if that build has completed. Yep, it has. So you can see I've got these two build definitions, different build definitions. You can tell that they've been around for a while because they both had 100% success. That's not what my build definitions usually look like. And again, we get all that kind of nice summary from the build itself. Test results, code coverage, and even SonarQube analysis. So this was a checkbox in my Maven step to say, do SonarQube analysis and make sure I've passed my quality gates. You can also say fail the build if I don't pass my quality gates. I leave that turned off because I'm not 100% sure I'm going to pass them. But you can see we've got bugs, code smells, code coverage, all that kind of stuff as well. So that's quite cool. So build's completed, and again we've got the link to the release. And has that already succeeded? I think the release to Docker is pretty quick. So let's refresh this and find out. There we go. So we got our link to Azure. It's been pushed through the Docker container. So IntelliJ, Visual Studio Team Services, building a Docker image with Java, with a Java app, and pushing it out to Azure using Azure Container Registry and Container Service as well. All in Ubuntu as well. So I'm not touching very much Windows-based stuff at all here. I think the build and release agents as well, don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure that's running in a Linux build agent that I have. So I have a Linux queue here. So it's running on a Linux machine as well. Or I could use the hosted Linux preview. It's just building Docker images is a hell of a lot faster if you have them cached. Same with Bower and stuff like that. So yeah, Java in a Java environment that Java developers might use, pushing out to Docker using VSTS. Awesome. And yeah, we saw a bit of branching policy stuff on that as well.
Like sometimes you have these overarching kind of libraries that change. You need to push that across, let's say, your whole infrastructure.
Yeah.
Can you connect builds or build pipelines together? So if something happens to this library, then you basically have to deploy the whole fleet.
Yeah, so the question was around like chaining builds and build dependencies and things like that. The truth is they're still working out the best way to handle that.
Okay. So am I.
Yeah. We had a product group call a little while ago where they were talking about so some of this is NDA, so I'm gonna pick my words. They were talking about how best to handle it, whether people would prefer kind of a push arrangement where at the end of your build you can say, now I want you to trigger these 3 builds as well because I care about them, or they're dependent on me, or whether it wanted to be a pull idea. So you say this build here or this project is dependent on these ones. So if they change, I need to rebuild and push it through the pipeline.
Right now it's just a manual process. We just go into our build and we just say, okay, rebuild this, and we'll go and get that updated library. But if we could just have it within that.
Yeah. So in VSTS right now, the option is doing it manually or having some kind of orchestration thing that you have written over the top that hits APIs and things like that. Or you could probably write a step in PowerShell or something like that to trigger builds based on other stuff. You can set up notifications. There's you can set up subscriptions and things in VSTS to say when this happens, hit this API. So you could manage that stuff a little bit by yourself. They are definitely going to come up with a solution to this, but I just don't know what it is yet.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just right now we're just actually have an automatic process that just goes in and bumps the versions and all these, which automatically checks into the environment.
It kind of makes me feel like it's the responsibility of the package manager process in a sense, though, right? Like,
Mm.
if you've got some dependent package that's now built, it'd be nice if there's some better mechanism. A lot of them have it, which is, should I always just take the latest available package, or am I hard coded in a sense to this version and wire that in? Because it's you should, like, if you are making a change to one of the dependencies, you should know that you've got to rebuild your dependent application or package, right?
Correct.
So what we're really talking about is some sort of hook to just say, hey,
Yeah.
there's a new package available, and if you're set to dynamically always depend on the latest version of that package, kick off a new build. So,
Yeah.
because that might be the only change you need to make in that downstream
Well,
So-
project.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, I was going to say, I wouldn't be surprised if something appears in triggers as well. So this is a continuous integration trigger, which basically means anytime the code changes in this particular branch, the master branch, then trigger the build. Or you can do scheduled ones. I wouldn't be surprised if something appeared there to say dependency on like a NuGet feed, like a particular package or something like that.
That's basically what I'm
Trigger it that way.
saying. Yeah.
Or a different build definition is a trigger to a new one as well. So, but yeah,
The trigger would be ideal if it was
Yeah.
actually the versioning indicator that it was a breaking change, potentially breaking change.
Well, you could potentially hook into it some, like, you define the process, but as long as there's some hook to say, hey, this project has a known dependency on these packages. So not only am I gonna look to see if someone changed code in this project, I'm also gonna watch those packages to see if they change. If any of those change, I'll trigger off the new build.
yeah. There's in pretty much everybody's environment who has this kind of dependency chain thing. I've learned that everybody says, well, the solution's easy, you just do this. But then you speak to somebody else and they say, oh, no, our scenario is very different. We
Right.
have, so having the one solution that kind of caters for all of those scenarios it's a bit trickier as well. But anyway, cool. I did that is because I am a dev from history. So I'm always in danger of likening DevOps to NoOps, which is a problem. It's they're definitely not the same thing. So if the developers are definitely empowered to create these pipelines and do that stuff themselves, but operations should be empowered to do this work as well. So through Azure as well, there's a lot of opportunity to create these pipelines yourself as an operations person rather than just a dev. So to demonstrate a little bit, I'm going to use a node. I'm going to do a node demo instead. So we're going to do this in, what am I doing this in? Mac. Cool. So this is actually where I spend most of my time. I'm going to use, can people see that? I'll zoom a bit. Totally different keyboard shortcuts. Yeah, so this is a node demo, basically just a basic Node Express app. And I'm going to use VS Code for this. Zoom that in as well. So this is VS Code. A few people mentioned that they use it already. It's freaking amazing. The main reason I'm going to use this is because there's some really good extensions for VS Code that you might not know about as well. So one is an Azure extension in VS Code, which lets you do things like browse to resources in the portal, even create web apps and things. So there's a ton of different functions that you can do right from VS Code. I'm actually going to do the whole login thing because I've probably logged out at this point. So I'm going to go Azure login, and this is amazing. This code has already been copied to my clipboard. I click sign in, paste the code in. I'm already logged in, I think. Nope, not really. So choose my account. There we go. Now I'm logged in. And then back in VS Code, it's logging into Azure and getting the list of my subscriptions. And now it's saying, hey, now you can choose the subscription you want to use for the remaining tasks. So let's do that. List subscriptions, and I'm going to use that CDA Global Demos one again. So now I'm using that subscription. So I want to create an Azure web app for this, and I could do this manually through the Azure portal, but this is cool, so I'm doing it this way. So let's create a web app. We'll call it demo node CTTDNU. Is that right? Did I get that right? Sweet. That's why I practiced 12 times. So here's the output from the Azure tools. And you can see that it's creating a new resource group for me. It's creating a server farm and a web app. So it's creating the resources in Azure that I want to do. I'm just going to copy that to a clipboard. And it should finish pretty soon, hopefully. There we go. So now I can browse using this Azure, using the extension, and choose my website. And it's just going to open a browser. That's not actually it. But yeah, so all that from inside VS Code, which is kind of cool that you have this integration. The other extension that you can use as well is a team services extension. So you can have a look at, if, for example, this was a Git repository that was in VSTS, I can do things like create a new work item and link a work item to a commit and things like that. So I can do all that kind of stuff in VS Code. However, I'm pretty sure that this code, let's just go to the terminal. This is also very useful as well. You can have a terminal inside VS Code. Yeah, so this code is actually in GitHub. So I'm going to build a pipeline in VSTS, pulling code from GitHub and deploying to this Azure App Service that I've just created. So let's go back to the browser. I'm going to just open this in a different window, and you can see there's kind of nothing in there. But as a IT pro or operations person, I still have the ability to create this pipeline. So if I go down to continuous delivery, which is still in preview, I can, from Azure, I can build this pipeline as well. So let's configure. I need to tell it where the code is, and by default it'll say this is in VSTS, but I get GitHub, an external Git, and a local Git option as well. So hopefully this won't take too long. The problem with connecting to GitHub when you work at Microsoft in a team that does a lot of work against docs.microsoft.com is I'm a member of 1 billion, approximately, repositories. So it takes a few seconds to load them all. So this is where the code lives, I think. No demo ethic. Was that right? Yep. So that's where the code comes from. But I obviously need a VSTS instance. Actually, I've skipped ahead. So the next thing I need to do is tell it what I'm building. So it knows where the code is. So it knows how to build a pipeline for ASP.NET, ASP.NET Core, Node, PHP, Python, and also a static web app as well. So I'm using Node. I'm actually not using a task runner. So this is you can use Gulp or Grunt. It knows how to deal with those to run tasks like, minification or whatever you wanted to do as part of your build. And then I need to tell it where to create this build definition itself. So it still needs a VSTS instance to be able to create the build and release definitions. So let's choose that again. And I've already got a Node app FSTO. So I've already got an instance there, which I can use to just have my CI/CD pipeline. All right. If I wanted to, I could set up load testing. In other words, if I deploy to environment, I could smash that environment with requests and make sure it performs okay. I'm not going to do that. And I could also deploy to a different slot. So this is where we were talking before about deploying to a staging slot and then swapping if we wanted to. But I'm going to leave those alone and just leave it as is. So it's configuring the continuous delivery. And so this is from Azure this time, but it's still going to VSTS. It's creating a build definition and a release definition. It knows how to build my Node app, and it knows how to create an artifact with all my Node goodness. And then the release definition knows how to take that artifact and deploy it out to my Azure App Service. So in there we go. Has that already been created? There we go. So it's completed that now, which is actually a lot faster than I thought. And we get a link, a deep link from Azure to the build definition, the release definition, but it's also triggered a build. So it's taken the code from GitHub and triggered a build just the same way as it did when we did it from Visual Studio. So it's using a hosted agent by default. So that should hopefully not take too long to pick that up. But while it's doing that, let's have a look at the build definition itself, just so you can see what's in it. So the process, it's using the hosted build, but it's getting its sources from GitHub this time. And in fact, in our triggers, we can see that trigger status is enabled. That little warning saying the remote repository's webhooks are missing and incorrect, that message is missing and incorrect. It actually does have the webhooks, it's just the error message appears. I said that this was in preview, right? So we're doing an npm install. If I had a task runner for my build, that would be there as well. It's zipping everything up, copying it to a target folder, and then publishing this back up to VSTS so the release can use it.
So what you're saying is it automatically created the webhook on the GitHub side back to VSTS servers.
Yeah, so I had pre-authorized my GitHub account with
Right.
Azure just to save a bit of time.
Yep.
But it's a standard, it doesn't use tokens, I don't think. It uses OAuth, I believe, I think. And so then it just set up those webhooks for a continuous integration trigger. So this is still running, it's doing an npm install. So it's doing an npm install on a hosted build agent. So that's what took all the time. And now it's publishing these artifacts. So that's completed. And again, there's no test results, but if I was using something like Jasmine or Mocha or something like that for Node, then I can publish those test results in a known format. And I think the formats are JUnit, I think it understands. And there's
The alcove.
Alcove?
Yeah, it's like a unit test coverage report.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of thing. Standard.
Yes.
.lcov or something like that.
So there's a bunch of different formats that these tasks accept, so you can push them up and get code coverage and test results that way as well. The other thing that I haven't shown you yet, but the artifacts, you can see what's actually being pushed up. This has actually just got 61.zip, so that's the zip file with everything in it. But our summary gives us that information, and again we get that link to our release. So that release should just be pushing to, it's in progress at the moment, we can watch the logs. So it's deploying to that Azure App Service. Where are we up to? Nothing yet. So this release definition as well, that's the one I created. It's, and again, this is in preview, it should not be called production. That annoys me. You shouldn't be going straight to production, but that's what it's chosen to call that first environment. It's taking the drop from the artifact, continuous deployment trigger, and doing that same thing. The step's actually exactly the same. It's just, here's an Azure App Service, here's a thing I know about, and then you can deploy to a different slot, and say here's where the package that I need to deploy is, and you can do things like web config changes and things like that. Now this is an Azure App Service running on Windows, so it's actually using IIS Node to run the Node application behind IIS. You might not want to do that, you might want to run this in Linux instead, and that's an option as well. I'll show you that in a sec, but I just want this to complete. It's doing Node stuff.
I have a quick question around the artifact.
Yeah.
In this case, where does the artifact live? Does that automatically get decided?
Yeah.
When you set up that.
So the artifact, yeah. So the question was where the artifact lives. So when you do that build, the agent itself pulls down your code into a working folder on whichever machine it's running on. It does its compilation. It keeps that file locally, and then there's this publish artifact step in the build definition,
Right.
and that pushes it up to VSTS. So it's actually living in VSTS itself.
Okay, in the VSTS project.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's attached to that build
Gotcha.
indefinitely.
Gotcha.
But I think you can change that publish location. and say, yes, send it up to VSTS, or push it to a file share if you want to as well. So if you have an agent on your local machine and you want to push it to a file share somewhere locally, that's an option as well. So that's spun up, which means I should probably be able to refresh this. And it's Node, although it is IIS. So there we go. So there's the hello world that we pushed from GitHub with this pipeline. Now just before I leave this, I want to show you one more quick thing. And that is the fact that when I created that Azure App Service, the web app, it was a Windows one. I can also say, when I create a new web app, I'm not going to actually create this one, so it doesn't matter what it's called. I can say this is Linux. And so this is an Azure App Service which is running a Docker host inside a Linux environment. So if I wanted to run it that way, I can use exactly the same configure continuous delivery, but the pipeline it builds is going to be slightly different. So this release definition, the build is generally the same, but the release definition, this is an example of one that is running in a Docker image in here. It will use the built-in image. So the build definition itself doesn't even know anything about Docker. It just builds a node application. But because VSTS can see that this particular app service is a Linux app service running Docker, it will turn this package, or wrap this package into a Docker container on this runtime.
Nice.
So this is a Node runtime. There's a whole bunch of versions of Node, as well as PHP, .NET Core, and Ruby as well. So you don't even need to package this into a Docker container. You just say, when you deploy, wrap it in a Docker container, deploy it to an Azure App Service, running in Docker on Linux. So that's pretty cool as well. Yeah, so that one is just working through exactly the same steps, it's just to a different target. Cool. So that was the Node demo. So how many, I've run out of operating systems as well. So this is kind of the key point here. Any language, we did .NET, we did Java, we did Node. Go's slightly more difficult because Go doesn't run in an app service, but if you had a Linux host that could run Go, that would be fine. Right now, VSTS doesn't have stuff on the agents that know how to build Go. So you have two options. You can either install Go as part of your build, which is probably going to be a bit slow, or you can have your own build agent that already has Go on it. And then you can do whatever you want to push that up as well. But same thing, Ruby, Python, all of the options are there. It's just a little bit more difficult in some cases, but we're slowly expanding that. And same thing, we did Linux, we did Mac, we did Windows. We didn't deploy to any mobile devices because that's not really my expertise, but I showed you some Docker stuff, pushing to Azure. I didn't show you AWS, but there's actually an extension in that marketplace which gives you steps to deploy to AWS, which was slightly surprising given that we're told that all roads lead to Azure. But if I wanted to, I'll show you. I don't know if I actually have it installed. It's because I've drunk the Kool-Aid. So AWS Tools for Microsoft is written by Amazon Web Services. It's the official extension from AWS. They worked really closely with the Microsoft team to actually get this working really well together, which is kind of amazing. That definitely wouldn't have happened on old Microsoft. But there you go. So you can deploy to AWS using extensions as well. And again, we deployed to, I showed you a deployment to Linux, and you can deploy using Mac and all sorts of stuff as well. So that is all I had to show you. Right. So thanks everyone. How did I do with time?
All right.
I went pretty long.
Well, you're hitting the mark.
Yeah.
I have stickers up here as well, by the way, if you want. There's the Friends Don't Let Friends one, VSTS ones, and then there's that definition of DevOps if you have a spare quarter of your laptop screen that you want to cover it on. But feel free to come and grab them if you
I had a
want.
quick question about the builds. Do you have access, or can you see like the raw files of the build process? Like if you have to do some special tooling?
The actual files themselves?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the build definition, the question was, do you have access to the raw files for the build, or do you have to do something special? So if you have an agent that's running on your infrastructure, all those files exist on disk in your environment. So I know when I was initially playing with this build stuff, back when it was pre-release stuff, I used to run a local build agent rather than the hosted ones, simply so I could see exactly what was going on. You can run the agents in like a service mode, or you can run them in interactive mode as well. So you can actually have the command line and see exactly what's happening. But yeah, the files are just there on disk. You can view them if you want to.
We're using Circle CLI, and you have basically the build is actually in a repo for each of the.
Right. Oh yeah, so the hosted build agents, you don't get access to them at all. That said, if you have a step in your build task, you could probably just zip up all of the entire folder and then just push it back up to the server or to a file share or something if you wanted to.
I guess what you're talking about is like pipeline as a code. Pipeline as code, the way you described it. So your actual CI definitions are part of the code.
Oh, sorry, I misinterpreted the question.
Yeah,
So
so I did too until you said that.
yeah, so it was about having the build definition itself defined as code. Right now, no, it's all in the tool, but they are working on YAML-based build definitions.
Yeah.
What they're thinking at the moment, though, is that they're not going to be swappable. So once you go to YAML, you can't go back to the UI. And that's basically because of how some of the underlying stuff works. So builds will happen, and then I assume releases and things will follow as well. There's actually on GitHub, if you go to, you probably just have to search for it because I don't know off the top of my head, but it's like VSTS tasks. And then they have some examples of what the YAML files are looking like in their mind at the moment. So you can have a look at what they're likely to be. Yeah. So not yet.
No, because that's actually something I didn't think of, which is really good.
So not yet, but soon.
Any more questions for Damien? Cool. Well, thank you again so much, Damien, for coming out. And special thank you as well to our full season sponsors, Matt and Natalie here from Northville Software, RL Solutions, and Microsoft, of course, as well as thank you to our swag sponsors. We're going to be giving away some of these prizes tonight. Did anybody not receive a red ticket that would like to participate in the draw? Cool. All right, I think we got everyone. So tonight we're going to do a book it's called Codecraft. It's going to be a button here too. Make sure to grab that. Ebook voucher for No Starch Plus as well. And then, as always, we have ASPOs. And then if you pick one of these two, please fill it out and leave it here. I will get the pens out. Don't forget. For those, and we'll put Damien to work a little bit longer, and we will get him to draw some names. So I did try to mix these up fairly well.
It's not talking, so.
Yes.
Fine.